morning, shall we? You got two teams that are one win away from the World Series. You got the Braves potentially, if they can close out against the Dodgers, and if Houston can take care of business against the Red Sox, you're looking at a Braves-Astros World Series. Now, last night, to watch Braves fans after what was debilitating is the wrong word for Game 3, but you didn't like the way that it went down. You didn't like the way that you gave up the lead. You had the ability to further your stranglehold on the defending world champions, and you let them off the hook. Last night was the exact opposite, and it could not have been more impressive than what the Braves did to the Dodgers in L.A. 9-2 in that game. This baseball postseason has been, for me at least, and I'm just speaking from personal experience, I've been in and out throughout the course of it, just kind of keeping track of the fact that, okay, the Astros are going to continue to win despite the cheating. And, oh, look, they're going up against the other cheaters in the ALCS against the Boston Red Sox. That ought to be fun. Who's more hateable out of that? And then you have the lovable Atlanta Braves, and you have the hated Los Angeles Dodgers. And, I got dragged pretty summarily when I said that I was rooting for Mookie Betts above all because Braves fans didn't like that. And I understand why. You're rooting for your team as opposed to individual players, even if Mookie Betts is Nashville's favorite son. But I wonder how closely everybody else has been following the championship series in Major League Baseball right now, because it's been smothered by all things football, at least from my standpoint. Now, it seems like certainly once we got to the championship series, I know my interest picked up. And I think a part of that is because I'm so curious to see, or I have been curious to see, the reaction to Houston and Boston specifically. Because they had the scandals around both of them. What was that, 2019? Everything kind of gets, I don't want to say swept under the rug, but you get lost in a lot of what was happening with COVID and the baseball season, given that they were the first ones to kind of wade into this mess while everything else was shut down. So you're looking at two still hated franchises in professional baseball at this point, but they're exciting to watch. Boston fans, I find Boston sports fans to be a special kind of unlikable. But their team, I think, has a lot of redeeming qualities, even if they didn't go through the regular season the way that you like. Their postseason has been exciting. And then I think everybody, do people still hate Houston? Do people still hate the Astros with that kind of passion?
Until the end of time.
Now, you say this is something, you you just said that very definitively. You're not any kind of giant baseball fan, are you?
No, I think that's a universal thing. Whenever the Astros are playing or whenever they get this far in the postseason.
Just because of the trash cans?
Oh, yeah. 100%. And just the way that they botched everything, in the aftermath, it felt like even Rob Manfred, it's not exclusive to the Astros, everybody involved just kept saying the wrong thing.
Oh, yeah. No, it was just a constant tripping and stumbling over each other to try and get the right message out.
What did Manfred say about, the World Series?
He said it about
it like a hunk of metal.
He said it about the trophy.
Yeah.
The commissioner of the sport was like, yeah, it's just a hunk of metal.
You imagine Roger Goodell talking about the Lombardi?
Roger Goodell physically throws himself in front of the Lombardi on a day-to-day basis to maintain the sanctity and quote-unquote purity of the National Football League. Rob Manfred's looking at the World Series trophy like, yeah.
I don't know what the big deal is.
Just a hunk of metal.
Did you stay up the whole game?
For the Braves? Yeah, no, I stayed up a lot, because I thought about going to bed.
If it was anybody else, would you have gone to bed?
I would have gone to bed.
Yeah, not doing that. I considered staying up.
100%. Oh, you didn't stay up?
No, after Rosario's second homer to make it a 9-2 lead, I that's when I called it. But I said, if this was ever going to be a game, it would be the Braves.
You got to talk a lot less than I do today. You're off the hook as far as that's concerned. But yeah, Rosario has been incredibly clutch throughout the course of this postseason, and he was red hot last night, sealing that 9-2 win for Atlanta. But I wonder how many people are experiencing the baseball postseason like we are, because that's the opportunity for baseball to draw. And it just so happens that they run smack dab into the middle of the NFL season. And you hate that for baseball because I think it deserves a lot more attention. But am I going to spend as much of my bandwidth focusing on baseball if, the Titans have just beaten the Bills and now the AFC looks a lot more interesting, and this is happening in 31 other NFL markets as well? Maybe more because baseball's always been regional this way, or at least in the last decade it's been a lot more regional this way. So I wonder how many people are experiencing the postseason like we are as a show, where it's just like, I'll keep an eye on it. It looks like the Braves got things in hand. I'm gonna knock off because they're playing on the West Coast and this is taking entirely too long, as it should. Or if you're just excited about that because you're an Atlanta Braves fan and you're on the precipice, you're a game away from the World Series.
Game away. What could go wrong?
Well, I mean, is it wrong that I'm rooting for things to go wrong just to watch Will Bowling squirm? Is that mean?
I think that qualifies.
Nasty?
I think that qualifies as mean. I think it falls into that category.
Yeah, but that's the fun of sports. You want to see your friends sport your favorite teams fall flat on their face, don't you? I mean, that's the nature of male intimacy, is when something that you love comes crashing down in dramatic fashion, then all of your buddies are not there to pick you up but point and laugh at you afterwards, like Texas fans against Oklahoma. I wasn't looking to pat my Texas friends on the back after they gave up that touchdown as time expired. I wanted to point and laugh at them. In fact, I did that over text message. I think that's what makes sports fun, or at least that's how I think sports are fun.
Wanting
Anyway.
people to be miserable.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's a big part of it.
It's a lot of. I think that people get a sick kind of enjoyment out of it, even if that's not the way that they want to describe it. Anyway. We'll keep tabs on that. Obviously, the Braves will play the Dodgers later tonight, 7:00 Central Time, with that 3-1 lead. The ability to close out, and we put it up on a poll. Do you trust them to do it, especially after how last season went in the championship series and kind of petering out at the end? In the meantime, we'll pivot to some Titans talk because Charles Davis is going to join us. CBS Sports, of course, VFL. He's on the Titans preseason broadcast as well. Him and Ian Eagle have the call of the Titans and the Chiefs this Sunday at Nissan Stadium. So we'll catch up with Charles coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Coming up today on Blaine and Mickey.
Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are rolling into Music City. Jay Binkley of 610 Sports Radio in Kansas City is going to join us in hour one to talk all about it. We'll also talk Belmont Hoops with Coach Casey Alexander.
And we have much to discuss with the coach, Doug Matthews, after Tennessee's loss to Ole Miss in the upcoming game against Alabama. He joins us at 2:20.
It's all coming up on Thursday.
Today, starting at 1 p.m. on 104.5 The Zone.
Hey, how are you doing, Buck? Good to hear your voice again.
Man, it's good to talk to you. I hope everything's going well. Everything is fantastic here. Certainly feels a lot better at 4-2 than it would at 3-3 if you're a Titans fan. And I know that is going to make a difference come playoff time as the Titans and the Chiefs get closer and closer to the postseason. But for this particular game, Charles, I guess just from a 1,000-foot view, what most intrigues you about these two teams squaring off?
Well, to me, it's just sometimes you just want to get simple with it, Buck. And to me, it's Derrick Henry. If this game stays within range either way, right? 30 carries?
Oh,
minimum.
Easy.
Okay? Minimum. You're looking at a run defense that has not proven itself. It's been gashed by a number of teams along the way. You're getting some guys back, they hope, in Chris Jones, but he hasn't played in a couple of weeks at defensive line. You're going to test them. So if you are a linebacker or a secondary player in Kansas City, this has not been a fun week, because if guys get married up on the blocks up front and he gets a run, now you're making – forget the joke about business decisions. There are no business decisions to be made. You have to go put your body on him.
Right.
And over 4 quarters, that's not a lot of fun. And bottom line is, if you're not willing to engage him for 4 quarters, you know what he does to people. So to me, that's what this game really truly comes down to. If Kansas City can't sprint away from them early, right? If they can't come out of the gate, like if you're a horse racing fan, I learned this from my friend Randy Moss over at NBC. A good start out of the gate is called he caught a flyer out of the gate. And Kansas City doesn't catch that flyer, or they can't pull away, and Tennessee can keep that game in range and the run game stays intact, then I can't imagine Todd Downing, the offensive coordinator, doesn't test them 30-plus runs with Derrick Henry.
The workload continues to be ridiculous for him. Every week, it seems, Charles, we come out of one of these games with Derrick Henry has done X, Y, and Z for the first time as an NFL running back since Jim Brown, or just some of these incredible Hall of Fame NFL greats across the decades. And I keep waiting for football to happen to Derrick Henry. But in a sport full of giant, tough, insane people, he seems to be bigger, stronger, faster than all of them. I don't know what the precedent is for him at this point.
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, the precedent is probably Earl Campbell to keep it within the franchise. The precedent is Eddie George. Heavy workloads. How long can it go? And then one day they show up at camp, Buck, and someone, a long-time observer of the team goes, ooh, old Derrick's taking it easy in camp this year, huh? Easing himself into it. Because they've seen that before. And what that usually means is, guess what? The accumulated hits have finally taken its toll. That's what happened to Campbell. I mean, all of a sudden Earl went from running through Isaiah Robertson to he couldn't run. You know, Eddie, as great a player as he was, at a certain point, it catches up with you, and you're not the same guy. Here's what I keep coming back to, though, Buck. I had to do a little bit of research, right? I got a master's in history, so I better put it to use occasionally, right? At Alabama, his first year, I think he had 35 carries. I think he got into the low 100s or 170 or something his second year. His third year, he jumped to 395. And you remember down the stretch in the college football playoff, he was getting about 40 touches a game, remember?
Yeah.
He gets to the Titans, first few years, wasn't much of a workload, was there? So his odometer is a little bit different for his age and for the experience in the game than it would be for a person who was a full-time. That's what made Emmitt Smith so remarkable to me. High school, college, NFL, he never had a year, quote-unquote, where he wasn't the guy. And they didn't shovel it to him, on almost every running play. So his longevity was off the charts as far as I was concerned, because it was longevity and productivity for a lot longer than you would expect. I think for Derrick Henry, those days he was frustrated not getting the ball may be paying off for him a little bit now, Buck, because obviously the workload has really started to increase. But prior to that, it wasn't anywhere close to what you would expect out of a guy of his caliber.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of the thing that most people have been surprised by, is that it's really rather recent, his success since about halfway through the 2018 season when he started to become the full-time starter under this Vrabel coaching staff. But we know the narratives. We know the storylines. Charles Davis of the NFL on CBS here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Of course, you can watch him, Ian Eagle, and Evan Washburn on the call locally on News Channel 5 and across the CBS Sports Network. Let's talk about the matchup, Charles, because I thought it curious the way that the Bills came out against this Titans offense. They stayed with nickel primarily, it seems, as their foundational defense, even against the Titans' 12 and 21 personnel sets. What did you make of Buffalo's approach to the Titans offense and how the Titans went about attacking it?
Well, I think that Leslie Frazier, their defense coordinator, and Sean McDermott, their head coach, who his background is full defense. I think they looked at their roster and said, our best players, our best defenses, even if it doesn't look right, are these guys on the field. Sometimes, Buck, you can look at things and say to yourself, here's the right game plan. But if the wrong guys are playing, that's worse than playing what you normally do anyway.
Sure.
Because let's face it, if you're going to adjust against Tennessee, I mean, Washington last week, we had Kansas City, Washington last week. Washington likes to play 5-down defensive linemen at times. That would be ideal against Tennessee until they prove otherwise. Because now you're saying, okay, we're going to get big bodies in there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the 5 that they're playing are legit 5. Okay, 4 first-round picks and Matt Ioannidis, who was a third-round pick but plays at a very high level. But if you don't have those people, and now you're trying to sub in guys and go, hey, this is my second and third-line guy, but the right thing to do is to get bigger bodies on the field, but yet he can't hold up anyway, I think you're better off playing your regular base defense and telling everybody, we know your big boy pads have been ordered, strap them on, and let's see if we can get it going. Because it's a catch-22 on that one. Play something you're unfamiliar with guys who aren't up to the task, or play what you're familiar with and then have to deal with the consequences of if they're able to keep beating on you and banging on you. The kicker to me in that game, Buck, if you go back and look at the stats, which I know you have, and you took names off of it, is there any way you saw Tennessee winning that game in the stats against Buffalo when it was all said and done?
Absolutely not.
Because there wasn't there's usually, when stats are tilted one side up for a team, there's usually a nullifier, an equalizer, meaning turnovers, something like that, right? Tennessee would have gotten 5 takeaways or something, right, to nullify. That didn't even happen.
Right.
Not that they didn't get takeaway, but it wasn't tilted into their advantage. That was a gritty, tough, hang in there, make plays when you had to effort that really fits what Mike Vrabel does. And in a lot of ways, Buck, I see that game as getting back what happened in New York against the Jets.
Yeah. I mean, you know this, Charles. The world was ending here in Nashville after they lost to a winless Jets team. And in fact, Lucas, if we could put that on the poll, does Mike Vrabel want every game to come down to 4th and short? Because I'm convinced he does. You can't tell me otherwise, Charles.
You know what I think about, Buck, when you said that? The name Steve Prefontaine.
Okay.
For those who may not remember Steve Prefontaine, he was our preeminent long-distance runner in the United States in the 70s. At the University of Oregon, ran in the Munich Olympics, finished 4th. Liked to be a front runner, didn't like people, crowding him in. His thing was always you run till you drop. You don't run tactically, right?
Right.
His was always that. And he said before the Munich games, I wanted to come down to a guts race because if it does that, I'm the only one who can win it. Doesn't that sound like Mike Vrabel?
It absolutely does. This is why Charles Davis is the best. Historical context for me making a dumb joke while he's on the air with us. Let's take a look at the Titans offense, Charles, because this was something that I think was the closest we've seen to their full complement of skill position players being available. We know that Julio Jones obviously didn't finish. We know that A.J. Brown is still not operating at 100%, but I was stunned by the amount of 3 wide receiver sets that the Titans ended up running. 37 snaps, 73% of their offensive plays came out of 11 personnel. How close is this, do you think, just from your observations of seeing some Titans games so far this year, limited, with the injury report that they've had, and now seeing what it was supposed, or a closer measure of what we think Todd Downing wants to do.
Yeah, I think that, what it told us, I believe, Buck, is that they have capable guys that they believe in behind Julio and AJ, and it's not going to alter what Todd Downing wants to do on offense. Meaning, I'm not sure how many of us went into the season and thought Chester Rogers, Nick Westbrook, Akina, are going to be those kind of guys that when the game's on the line, you're still going to call offense the same way. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yet, what did we see in this ball game? The last drive, the go-ahead score, which turned out to be the game-winning score, Westbrook Akina, 3 catches, 27 yards, his first 3 catches of the night. Obviously, AJ battled hard, being sick and playing in that game and coming off of injury. Julio went, and then the hamstring went. But Rodgers gave them some play. Batson gets hurt, so now you've got to dig even deeper. I'm really still waiting for Ferkser at tight end. I don't know how much the injuries have played into it. I really thought this would be kind of preseason. I said Dawson Knox would be a breakout player for Buffalo. So occasionally you get one right, Buck?
Nailed it.
I thought Ferkser would be similar, if that makes sense. But I know he's been battling some injuries and trying to, battling through some stuff. But I still think if he gets healthy, that's another weapon that I think will be utilized, and that may be one of those surprise things down the road. But what I gathered out of it is that Todd Downing believes in those guys enough that he's not going to have to alter things if he likes the matchups out wide, if he likes being able to spread the field a little bit to keep giving some running lanes to Derrick Henry. All those things still kick into place. And to me, that's huge for Tennessee because now they're not announcing to the world that, hey, if there's no AJ and no Julio, guys, guess what? We're going back to darn near single wing, and the whole game's going to be played within the college hash marks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, and that's exactly how they've been having to play with the limited personnel that they've had available to them. Give my Hoosier the
question.
Go ahead.
Ask you a question because you
absolutely
follow this team as well as anyone. When the game came down to Buffalo having the ball on the last drive, and Mike Vrabel's not using timeouts, did anything flash through your head like it did mine?
I'd call a timeout, Mike, is what we were screaming in the press box, to be honest with you.
Well, you know what flashed through my head?
What's that?
Super Bowl, New England, Seattle. Down the stretch, everyone's screaming for New England to take their timeouts on defense. Seattle's marching. Bill Belichick never takes the timeout. Felt like Seattle wasn't quite organized on their side. Felt like he was. Waited for him to make the fatal mistake. Instead of running it in, they threw it. They make the play. This ball game, Mike Vrabel, all I saw after the game was he said, I felt like we would hold him to 3. So at worst, he's in overtime, right? He doesn't call the timeout. Same thing. The 4th down play when Buffalo decided to go for it, because I know it's after the game, but I'm screaming at the TV, so I'll take a lie detector anywhere. Kick the field goal. I know what the analytics told me, Buck. But I'm screaming kick the field goal to Buffalo. You know why? Because Tennessee's defense was beat up.
Yeah.
I take it to overtime. I know Tennessee's offense was hot. I'm not stupid. I watched the game. But I'm taking my chance with Josh Allen and my crew in overtime and not losing it here. Now, I understood why he did it. In most cases, he's going to be successful. It's a sneak. It's, a half a yard, whatever it was. Josh Allen. But remember how they hurried to the line of scrimmage, Buck?
Oh, it looked panicked.
Okay, now here's the kicker to that for me. I don't hurry at that point for this reason. They know you're coming on 4th down.
Yeah.
You're not surprising them rushing to the line of scrimmage. Take your time. Make sure you got it set. And maybe his footing's better. But they rushed. They got stuffed. Great play by Jeffrey Simmons. Don't take that away from him. And does that now, to me, it equals what we saw in that Super Bowl. Wait for your opponent to make the mistake. They don't seem quite as together as maybe you might think. And Mike Vrabel had enough confidence and chutzpah to hang in there And, boy, did it pay off in a big way. His team rewarded him. That's what I was thinking during that time.
And here I thought that Mike Vrabel's biggest moment of trying to show the Bills some stones was the Music City Miracle recreation that they tried in the first half. But no, that's such brilliant insight from you, Charles, and I really appreciate you educating the offense and giving us, or the audience, and giving us that perspective, because I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I've seen NFL Network run the Super Bowl recaps or the Super Bowl specials after the fact on that a million times, and heard people talk about the fact that Bill Belichick is just silently waiting there with his timeouts, waiting for the opposite sideline to start to scramble, because why isn't Bill doing what he absolutely should be doing in that moment? That is not something at all that I had considered, but it makes all the sense in the world.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I don't know that I'm right. I mean, I haven't talked with Mike yet. We'll talk this weekend and see what he has to say on that. And knowing Mike, he'll give me that look.
He'll snort at you and just stare through the Zoom.
He'll give me that look like, have your theory, whatever, but that doesn't mean I got to co-sign anything. What else you got for me? And frankly, that's one of the reasons that I'm a big admirer of him, because he could very well, let's say I'm right, Buck. Let's say there's a chance I'm right. If I say that to other coaches, you know what they do? They puff up pretty well. Get a little smile.
Yeah.
Act like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Mike Vrabel doesn't play that game at all. It's like, I'm not going to tell you I'm smarter than anyone else. I'm just going to do things the way I think they should be done. And it worked out pretty well for him.
It's very, very on brand, and it's good to know that the look that he gives does not discriminate just to the local media.
Oh, no. It's an equal opportunity look, Buck. I mean, it's an equal opportunity look. We all get it. There's no question.
I've gotten that stare a million times before, Charles. I can feel it in my soul right now. Charles Davis, the NFL on CBS, VFL, kind enough to give us some of his time. I know you're busy this week, Charles. We appreciate it. And we'll certainly be watching on CBS this weekend as you guys call this Chiefs-Titans game. It's going to be very, very exciting. And I hope you guys get half the atmosphere that was here in Nashville on Monday night, because that was something special.
That was special, and it was deserved, because they don't get many cracks at that primetime deal, and the fans turned out and showed the world. They've got a great football team, a great atmosphere. There'll be great atmosphere on Sunday as well. It's a terrific fan base. And for me, Buck, last thing, it's Bama week. And I realize we haven't had much success against Bama in a long time in Tennessee, but Bama week will always be special. And if you played in this rivalry, we're a part of it. And I know Bama people are like, what rivalry? Well, it's still a rivalry as far as we're concerned. I'm 56, Buck, and my body still reacts to Bama week.
I love
that. That's all I got to tell you.
100%. See, here I was going to open the interview by asking if it was you throwing the mustard bottle at Lane Kiffin, but I thought I would give you plausible deniability.
That would not be me, but I've had a bottle thrown at me in Neyland Stadium before on what people thought was a bad call, and it was a whiskey bottle.
Oh, God.
And straight on brand for my people, it was empty, because there's no way they're wasting a good slug to throw until they drain the bottle.
Amen. Well, enjoy the game on Saturday, and then, of course, the game that you'll be working on Sunday. We really appreciate you taking the time, Charles. I know the audience enjoys it as well.
Thanks a lot, Buck. It's always great chatting with you. Look forward to seeing you at the stadium on Sunday. You take care.
Absolutely. You too. Charles Davis, one of the best in the business, here with us on 104.5 The Zone. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the analysis that Charles gave us, and I want to take a look at what's happening potentially in the AFC South, because one of the biggest stories in sports today having to do with the NFL is what's happening with Desean Watson and potentially his movement to the Miami Dolphins. We'll give you the latest on that as reported by the Houston Chronicle, and we'll talk about how it impacts, really, the rest of the NFL potentially this season. That's up next. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Every Titans game is on 104.5 The Zone.
You know what? I just love that.
Your flagship for Titans radio is 104.5 The Zone.
capital with which to acquire some help in the secondary, and I'll tell you what that is later on in the show. David Long, by the way, Titans linebacker, is going to join us at 11:15, so in about a half hour from now, we'll talk to him, and I'm sure he already had to answer questions about headbutting Josh Allen, but I'm sure we'll see if he won't be willing to have some fun with us about it when he hops on before practice today. So, Desean Watson. Did anybody see this report from John McClain last night? I think it kind of got swept up in not a news dump type of way because it's still during the week, and normally this stuff picks up more traction. But John McClain, famously of the Houston Chronicle, has covered the NFL for 45 years, which is a ridiculous amount of time. He was out there last night reporting that a deal for Desean Watson to be sent to the Miami Dolphins could be done this week. Now, the Houston Chronicle, unfortunately, and it's not like I'm unwilling to pay for journalism. I pay for the New York Times. I pay for the Wall Street Journal. I pay for a lot of things. I pay for the Athletic. You know, I'm not above paying for stuff, but this particular article is behind a paywall, so I went to ESPN because I knew that they would aggregate it and take the best parts of it and then put it in a story for themselves for their own traffic purposes. So what is basically happening is the only new information on this story is that the deal could be done this week. Now, what also has been circulated from multiple sources is that Tua Tagovailoa could be sent in a 3-team trade, potentially, to the Washington football team, who, of course, does not have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is probably just shaking a fist at the sun saying, I can't escape this guy. It was supposed to be his job this year, and then he gets hurt and he injures, I think, a hip, and then loses his starting opportunity to Taylor Heineke. Now, potentially, the guy who unseated him in Miami last year could end up as the Washington football team's quarterback. But for the purposes of this information, it's not new information. And so as I'm working through this, nothing has changed from a legal standpoint, right? We haven't seen any new information about civil lawsuits potentially turning criminal. We have no idea whether what we're talking about with Desean Watson and the allegations of sexual assault and sexual harassment, whether they have the potential to turn criminal, whether that has the potential to yield jail time. All we know is that the NFL is just not doing anything with this guy. They're not suspending him. He's not on the commissioner's exempt list, which is just this nebulous place that they stash players, like Adrian Peterson when he was accused of roughing up one of his children, or Greg Hardy, I believe, was on the commissioner's exempt list for a period of time as well. When the league has problematic players and doesn't know what to do with them, typically that's where they end up. And I had not heard of it really until the Adrian Peterson situation a couple of years ago. But they haven't even done that with Desean Watson. Nobody knows, or at least nobody outside of the legal proceedings has seen any movement on that front. So what's changed with the Dolphins that would bring about new information on this story? I think that's the biggest question that you got to ask yourself when you're looking at what John McClain is reporting about a deal potentially being done to send Desean Watson to Miami this week. Is it just the fact that the owner's pissed off that the Miami Dolphins, who are probably the most disappointing team in football this year, they were 10-6 a year ago. They're 1-5. They just lost to the damn Jacksonville Jaguars in London. So what happened? Are you just at this point languishing enough that you're willing to sacrifice potentially, again, all of these are allegations until anything more concrete becomes of the Desean Watson situation. So you're potentially willing to sacrifice your morals just for wins? And the answer is inevitably yes, because this is the National Football League after all, and morality is always trumped by the ability to get more wins, even if you're on a 1-5 miserable, stinky Dolphins football team. Is it the fact that you just straight up lost to Uncle Herb? You just gave creepy Uncle Herb and the Jacksonville Jaguars their first win of the season. Is that enough to move the needle to say, all right, for the owner to be like, enough of this bleep? Okay, Brian Flores, you were supposed to be the one good branch on the Bill Belichick tree, and that has since fallen flat on its face this season. Their roster is supposed to be appreciably better. For whatever reason, they've spent so many picks, so many first-round picks on the offensive line in Miami, going back to like Jake Long and Marquise. Was it Marquise? Which Pouncey played for the Dolphins? Ramon Foster is probably going to get pissed at me because now I'm going to get them mixed up. I do this every time. Lucas is not the other one. Schaefer says he's it was the other one, not Marquise. Thank you for all your good help. I got Schaefer in here. Mike Pouncey. I got Schaefer in here making himself a cup of coffee and doing a better job EPing the show than Lucas.
Oh, you come in here.
Help me help you.
Shafe, come on in, Shafe. I'll head home.
Regardless, the Dolphins suck. Is that enough for the ownership group to be like, all right, the Tua experiment, had enough of it? I don't even think it's Tua's fault. If you watch that miserable 9:30 in the morning Jags-Dolphins game, because apparently we just were still finding ways to pay the United Kingdom back for 1776. It's not enough that we emancipated ourselves. We have to send them the worst possible NFL games every week to make sure that we're still sticking it to Big Brother at this point. The War of 1812. Can people? I love Schaefer as just a background
it's
voice.
It's distant, but it's there.
I love somebody just walking by the microphone and just picking up the War of 1812 in the background. There he is on Zone TV for the people watching at home. But why are the Dolphins now in desperation mode? That's the biggest question about this. Is it so far gone that they're just like, all right, enough. If the Texans aren't going to do anything with this guy, why don't we? Does this not seem bizarre to you? 615-737-1045 is how you get involved. 615-737-1045. Now, this is starting to come back up because the trade deadline is what? Is it 13 days? 12 days from now, the NFL trade deadline, 3 p.m. Central Time. So it brings about a more local conversation. Do the Titans do anything at the deadline, given the state of their roster and given the nature of what this season is supposed to mean, this push that they're supposed to make? ESPN has put up on their website the best trade deadline projections, for lack of a better term. So I want to ask you guys, would you be willing to trade Josh Reynolds? I don't know that there would be any buyers for Josh Reynolds at this point. He's been a healthy scratch several times, and he's on a roster right now that doesn't, that of all the places that it lacks depth, the Tennessee Titans roster feels pretty comfortable about the wide receiver position if they can get Julio and AJ back on track. Would you be comfortable shipping off Josh Reynolds if you can find a buyer for him? And what would you want the Titans to acquire at the trade deadline 12 days from now? 615-737-1045 is the number. We'll talk about it coming up next. We'll take your phone calls as well. Don't forget the Titans linebacker David Long is scheduled to join us at 11:15. Mike Golic Jr. of ESPN at 12:20. It's 104.5 The Zone.
The Titans have their sights set on Andy Reid's AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs. Mike Keith and Coach Mack have the call.
Did he get in? Yes, he did! Touchdown! Titans!
Kickoff is Sunday at noon on your flagship for Titans Radio, 104.5 The Zone.
and we'll start to see people who are, I mean, this is not like baseball, right? This is not necessarily buyer's market, seller's market. You don't see these kind of drastic moves in the NFL the way that you do in the two other major professional sports, or rather three other if you want to consider hockey in there. By the way, the Stadium Series press conference at Nissan Stadium was yesterday. Are you gonna try and go to that game, Lucas?
Yeah, I am. That's going to be quite a sight. They put the outline of the rink in the middle of the field just to give it the visual. But yeah, that's going to be a pretty cool scene.
I need to look into that for myself. But for the purposes of the trade deadline, Desean Watson is being discussed or apparently could be traded to the Miami Dolphins by the end of the week. That's according to John McClain at the Houston Chronicle. And so we'll discuss Titans trade possibilities here in just a second, because I do think that they should be active at this trade deadline for one position in particular. But let's go to the phones for the first time today. 615-737-1045. Is it TC Jolly in Lebanon? Wants to talk about Desean Watson.
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hey, first off, I want to say this. I listen to your show pretty much every day, and I know you probably have been told this before, but you sound like Chris Collinsworth.
I hate that so much. Chris is great, but I hate that. That's the worst. You're right. I've been told that a million times.
I don't understand that.
It's I get a little nasally. Chris has got that too.
Yeah.
Here's a guy.
Well, my topic is and I'll try to be quick on this. It's about the NFL, Desean Watson, and the NFL's behavior. Okay, basically the NFL is saying it's okay for you to sexually assault a woman, slap a woman, beat your kids, as long as you apologize. But it's not okay to take a knee against social injustice. Instead of letting Kaepernick back in the league, they want to throw money at the problem. Not at him, but at the problem in general. So that should tell people what the NFL is all about.
Well, yeah, but TC, I mean, you should know that going in, right? Like Desean, you're saying all you got to do is apologize. Desean Watson, there's been no apology because that would be an admission of guilt, no?
Yeah, no, it's all been claiming innocence from the side of he and his lawyer.
That's why this story. That's why this story became so much more interesting, because he came out vehemently on his social media platforms and basically said, I look forward to clearing my name throughout the course of this process. And that was, 6 months ago? I feel like we've been talking about Desean Watson since the day we started this show in March. I really do. So it's been so ongoing, and really with not a ton of movement one way or the other. And again, we're not tracking this day to day. I'm sure the people in Houston, there's nothing else to do because their football team is horrendous. But I'm sure that Houston sports media is tracking this at much greater length than we are. It's just when something bubbles to the surface this way that it kind of reinvigorates the conversation. But that you go through the details, or what has changed since the last time you talked about this, and the answer is not really anything other than what John McClain is saying, that a deal could be done with Miami by the end of this week. But as to the morality of the NFL, I mean, why are you looking to the NFL for morals? You know what I'm saying? I don't get why people do this. I don't get why you need to ask, and I understand why you do, and I understand why people take it, maybe not seriously isn't the word that I want, but why it's so widely distributed, because a lot of these professional athletes and these sports franchises and these leagues have incredible reach to get people involved. So you try to use the platform for various causes. But to look at the NFL as a source for morality, I think that's your first mistake. That's why after the Ray Rice situation, when I'm sitting there looking at that video and being like, well, what the hell did you think domestic violence looked like? Why is this video making such a big difference for you? But there's no question that the video makes it hit. I mean, I shouldn't say hit home, but you know what I mean. It brings it makes it more of a visceral reaction when you physically see somebody in the act of knocking their girlfriend out in an elevator. But when you hear about it without the video evidence, you just kind of You just kind of move along because it doesn't impact you in that way. And so to trust the NFL as a source for morality, it's why this vaccine thing where the NFL is making, and all professional sports leagues are at this point, making such a strident push to get their players and their coaches and everybody involved with the league vaccinated. It's the one time that the NFL, and I'm not saying it's a moral cause, but I'm saying it's the one time that the NFL actually aligns itself through no intention but the bottom line, is aligning itself with like medical science. We'll spend some more time on this later, and I'll tell you what trade possibilities the Tennessee Titans should be exploring, both players to trade away and players to acquire. We'll do that after we speak with Titans linebacker David Long, because he's up next.
The Vols have a Saturday night SEC date with Alabama. And I know at least one person who's calling for an upset.
Hey, yo! Vols fans! Go Vols!
Kickoff is Saturday at 6 on your home for the Vols and SEC 104.5 The Zone.
on Nashville Sports Radio of you guys win against the Buffalo Bills on Monday night. What was that environment like for you, David? Because obviously the one penalty, I'm sure the coaches weren't crazy about, but you played a fantastic game otherwise, and your guys' defense did a really, really good job on Josh Allen.
It was a great experience, man. It's a good team Monday night, man. It's really not much more you could ask for. And the energy my guys is out there playing with, with just, a lot of that stuff you kids just can't coach. You just gotta be in you. So that I was just, happy to see, everything was coming, together. Everybody was playing fast, just playing off one another. It was good to see.
It was good to see, and I know the fan base was excited about the way that you guys collectively performed on both sides of the ball. But for the defense, David, during training camp, it was clear and obvious to at least us, media, watching you guys out there, that there was a different level of confidence about the way that you guys were approaching your day-to-day. You felt more comfortable, just from our standpoint, in what we were seeing you do and the execution on the practice field. How much of that has started to materialize throughout the course of the season, despite the disruptions that you guys have had with injuries?
Yeah, I just feel like it just takes, comfortability. All guys, just practicing together, everybody, being on the same page. Once we get to that point where everybody is on the same page and playing off one another, it's just gonna be hard to, get from that. So I feel like, that's just what's coming together. Everybody, is on the same page. Everybody, sees the vision, and off the field, we're tight. So I think that plays a big role too.
Titans linebacker David Long is our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. So let's talk about this game, because one of the first big performances that you had here in Tennessee was against this particular team that's coming to Nissan Stadium on Sunday. Now we talked about this the last time that you hopped on the radio show with us, but I mean, you're filling in a reserve role. You punch out the fumble that Rashaan Evans recovers for a touchdown. The stadium's going crazy. In fact, that's probably, outside of that Monday night, David, that's probably the wildest environment that I've seen at Nissan. Do you black out in that moment when you pop the fumble loose? Do you even see Rashaan pick it up and run with it?
I didn't, for real, at all. I was really trying to find the ball, honestly, because I knew I had punched it out. I was just trying to find it, and I ended up, looking at the board, and Rashaan is hightailing to the end zone. So I just had to go down there and celebrate with him. But, that was a big play in the game, I remember that vividly. So, and me and Rashaan, we were just talking about, because it's a little celebration. I told him I wanted to use his celebration that he used after he scored.
All right.
So yeah, that was a nice little moment in the game.
All right, how choreographed are the celebrations defensively? Because now they got the camera in the end zone for you all to come together after you get a turnover, after somebody scores a touchdown on the defensive side of the ball. How much time is spent in rehearsal prior to that?
What's crazy is it's none. That was just made up. And everybody, if you look at the video, you'll see everybody just trying to figure out what he's doing. We all ended up, noticing, that it was, just drinks, and we was like, that was the celebration.
That's how it goes.
It's all funny games, so.
No question. I appreciate that, but you're not going to be able to convince me that Nick Westbrook-Akina, when he caught his touchdown pass a couple of weeks ago, didn't have the Billy White Shoes Johnson rehearsed. You're not going to convince me of that.
Yeah, I don't know what he was doing on his free time. It looked a little too smooth, though.
So we really haven't had the opportunity to get to know you a ton, David. And I know you got to get out to practice, so we won't keep you long here.
Yeah.
But I was reading some of the biographical information on you. I had no idea your dad was a former professional boxer and that he has at one point in his career fought Deontay Wilder.
Yeah. We're not gonna speak too much on that fight, But yeah, my dad was boxing, growing up. He's been a professional boxer. He was a professional boxer for a while, until age.
Yeah.
But yeah, that growing up, and going to those fights, and being around that and experience, and practicing with my pops, that was experience in itself.
What's that environment like? Because just coming up with a parent who's in that world where you're literally fighting for your living to a degree, that has to be such a unique experience to go through as a child that way.
Right. growing up as a kid, you really don't think too much of like, you really it just looks like, it's fun or sports, like, or competitiveness. But like getting older, I see, like the work and the actual, everything else that goes into, that profession. So, now that I'm older, me and my dad talk a lot about, what it took to, get in there and stay in there and play at not play but box at such a pro level. But I looked at it from a different perspective from now growing up.
So
but it's the experience though.
I can't even begin to imagine. So do you then root against Deontay Wilder when he gets knocked out by Tyson Fury? I mean, you have to, right?
Nah. I don't. I watch. I love boxing, so I'm into it. But I'm not. I wasn't rooting against him.
Well, what do you make? I'd like to stay here if that's okay with you, and we'll get you out of here in a couple of minutes. But
cool.
what do you make of boxing right now? Because I'm looking at Wilder Fury Part 3, and I'm entranced by it. Right? That's what boxing is supposed to look like to me. And then I see this mutated version of boxing where it's the Paul brothers and it's Floyd Mayweather and the circus that's happening over here. And I wonder, as somebody who's a fan of the sport, do you enjoy both elements of that, or are you more a purist in that regard?
I am a more purist. Like I'm definitely not about to buy the Jake Paul fight.
Well, that's because you're smart, David. You're smart. You're not gonna spend your money on that.
Right. That's just entertainment. Some guys or some people want to see that. But as far as like the more serious part, I'm more into like you said, the Tyson Fury third. That was a great match. Or Gervonta Davis, stuff like that. Those guys.
Yeah, well, I wish more people had that kind of appreciation because the YouTube audience continues to grow for the Paul brothers. But
it's funny though. It's a show for sure.
It's funny, but it makes me sad, David. I'm like, how are people spending their money on this? This can't be how we're spending. We're choosing to spend our free time anyway. It's a longer conversation for another day.
I agree.
So with this game against the Chiefs on Sunday. What they've been through, they're still good. They're still playing at a high level. But Mahomes has looked a lot different this season. What are your guys' observations been of this Chiefs offense right now? Because it seems to be a little disjointed from an untrained eye view.
We see they still have those same players, those same playmakers, and that's still Patrick Mahomes at the end of the day. We just know we have to. They have the ability to make big plays, when they want. So we just had to, come in, look at the film, which we've, been doing, and get on the practice field, and correct those mistakes that has hurt us, along the way, or from past games that we've played, and correct them. Just be sharp and come ready to play.
What was the biggest correction you guys felt you made against the Bills? Because I know the yardage that was allowed and the fact that they still put up 31. That's something that gets held against you statistically, but I thought the game plan was really, really well executed. What step did you guys feel like you took the most in that game?
Well, just taking a step back, especially me personally, because I missed some tackles the week before, so that was a big thing going into this game for not only me but the team. Defense was tackling, communication, everything, just the little things, and I feel like we took that step, even though, a couple big plays that hurt us. But, in the red zone, we, came to play a few times, so they earned it, So that's how we can ask for it.
Titans linebacker David Long has been our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. David, continued health and success, and have a good time at practice today, and we'll be watching on Sunday.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have David Long, Titans linebacker, on the show. I really, I know people are are not giving them as much credit as I think they deserve on the defensive side of the ball, or maybe I'm just in an echo chamber of my Twitter mentions, right? Because I'm out here celebrating them for what they did to not stop Josh Allen and the Bills, but to limit them. Because that's all you can ask for against a team like that. It's not about stopping Kyler Murray, right? It goes back to the Jeff Simmons thing from week 1. We're not trying to kill him. We're trying to capture him. We're trying to keep him down just long enough to give our offense the ability to keep pace with what is a really, really well-rounded football team. Now, that's a different situation. because Mahomes is, when he's right, and I don't know how much of what he's experiencing, and we'll hear from Greg Cosell on this later on in the show because we talked about this on yesterday's episode of The Install. I don't know how much of what Mahomes is experiencing is just a general skittishness because his offensive line doesn't pass protect very well. They seem to be better, more efficient at run blocking. For as great as Trey Smith is, it's just collectively as a unit, they seem to be better in that element, which is kind of reminiscent of the Titans right now. But he also, in that Super Bowl, or after that Super Bowl that the Chiefs lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers most recently, he came out, or it was reported that he was dealing with turf toe, like throughout the course of that season, or at least during the postseason. And you talk to guys who play in the NFL, medical staffs in the NFL, turf toe can really bleep you up, especially when you're somebody who relies on your footwork the way that an NFL quarterback would, especially this NFL quarterback, where so many of the great plays that he makes are outside of the schedule, right? Off-schedule plays. And this is happening across the NFL. It's rare to find a quarterback who doesn't excel at off-schedule plays the way that the Mahomes and the Kyler Murrays and the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jacksons of the hell, Ryan Tannehill makes plays off schedule every once in a while. But you're seeing that become more the norm rather than the anomaly. So for the Titans and their defense, and for David Long in particular, he's been the starter now for some time. This is his job. Even when Jayon Brown returns off of IR, if in fact he does return off of IR, we'll see how long his stint is there. David Long is still going to be a fixture on the field. He's played every defensive snap in 3 of the last 5 games. He's missed only 3 snaps in those 5 games that he's played. They're not taking this dude off the field for anybody right now. And so, the penalty obviously was inexplicable, where it looks like they have Josh Allen dead to rights, where the play might as well have been blown dead, but it wasn't. And David Long just kind of runs up, or I don't know whether it was an accident or if he just didn't realize that there was no forward progress anymore for Josh Allen, but he just kind of headbutts him, and then they get a free first down, and they move the chains that way. It keeps the drive alive. It's not like you can't overcome those mistakes, because he did. He had one bonehead play, and then he played as good a game as I've seen from him all season long. His 2 best games so far have come against the Seattle Seahawks and against the Buffalo Bills. And that revelation at linebacker, while you're still trying to figure out what you have in Rashaan Evans, which if you're in year 4 of Rashaan Evans and you're still trying to figure out what you have in him, you probably know what you have in him, and you know that it's not good enough. You have Avery Williamson on the roster, who's a 2-down linebacker who's not going to play for you in nickel packages, but can he supplement and give you some help in run defense as he kind of learns the playbook more? Can he find more opportunities on the field? It's possible. And then you have what's happening in the secondary for the Tennessee Titans right now, which is a bit of a nightmare scenario. Caleb Farley done for the year, Christian Fulton on IR for at least the next 2 games. And you're still unsure what the status of Chris Jackson is, because he did not participate. He did not practice yesterday and was ruled out in the 4th quarter of that game with a foot injury. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in the conversation. Let's go to Rob in Nashville, who wants to chime in. What's up, Rob?
Hey, thanks for taking my call this morning, Buck. Enjoying your show.
Thank you.
I was just listening to your radio show, and I've been listening to a lot of the shows, and, I'm not sure if anybody said this, but I think in that game that was just played with the Buffalo Bills the other day, I think the fans played a big part at the end in this team winning. Had this game had been played in Buffalo without our fans, I think we probably would be looking at a different outlook, but the Titans would have still, been able to keep up. But these fans here, they deserve a lot of that credit, So that's all I got. And also, I know y'all been talking about King Henry and Derrick Henry, and I did hear you just talk about the line. They are doing good, and I'd like for people to give them more credit because I've been tearing the line up myself too, and it's not all Henry. I know Henry is tired of getting all the glory. So anyway, Henry is doing it though.
Hey, Rob, I appreciate the call. We had to fade you down, buddy. Lucas, how much are you enjoying doing that to people? Thank you for the call, Rob. 615-737-1045. Do you think people notice listening in their cars when you just hear somebody sinking into the background like that?
I can't say it doesn't give me joy, but we appreciate Rob.
No, we appreciate
and it was a good call.
Listen, it was, I saw Lucas get his finger on the trigger as soon as Rob goes, that's all I got, but also, and then goes into a whole tangent about Derrick Henry and the offensive line. All right, so let me take this in parts, shall I? Titans fans played a massive role in that win. There's no disputing that. I think that what Charles Davis talked about earlier, and in fact, Lucas, if we could, I know I don't want to do this to you on short notice, but if we could track down that clip of what Charles Davis said about why Mike Vrabel, why he's guessing Mike Vrabel didn't take those timeouts at the end of the game, the fans have a lot to do with the kind of chaos that you're creating on the opponent's sideline. Let me not put Lucas under pressure like that. So this is basically what Charles said, okay? Remember the Super Bowl between the Seahawks and the Patriots. Remember the fact that while Russell Wilson and the Seattle offense were on the goal line and the clock was running and Bill Belichick is sitting there not taking the timeouts that he has at his disposal to try and get his defense together. Instead, he's letting Pete Carroll sweat it out and causing further confusion on the opponent's sideline because he knows what he wants to do. His players know what he wants them to do. But now can Pete Carroll figure out, okay, now the clock is on me because I'm sitting here dedicating bandwidth to the fact that why the hell isn't Bill Belichick taking a timeout in that situation? Mike Vrabel had those timeouts at his disposal. And, in fact, he had all three timeouts at the end of the first half, too, which was kind of curious because they had 40 seconds left on the clock. I thought that was at least a possession. But anyway, for the Titans in those waning moments in the fourth quarter, Vrabel, and whether he would admit this or not, him doing that caused further commotion, not just in the Bills' huddle, but on their sideline as well. Because then their coaching staff is trying to think, okay, why is he not taking a timeout? What does he know that we don't know? Now they're in their own heads, and all of a sudden Josh Allen is scrambling to get into the quarterback sneak situation, slips, falls, Jeff Simmons catches him, game over, ball game Titans. Those are the kind of things that the fans can play a massive part in. It's why home field advantage was non-existent last year, because there were no fans to cause those kind of disruptions for the visiting team's offense. 615-737-1045 is the number. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. So, with that being said, this will be something that it's going to be a different kind of test than Josh Allen. Because what they were doing, the coverages that they were playing against the Bills on Monday night, they were designed to limit explosive plays. There was, and Greg Cosell and I went through this yesterday on the podcast. There was not one time, and I'm looking at Greg's notes, I had to read them through twice to make sure that I understood exactly what he was saying. There were almost no times where the Titans brought more than four-man pressures. The exclusive goal of the Titans defense on Monday night against Buffalo was to keep explosive plays from happening, and they thought, all right, let's see if we can finally be one of these teams that effectively gets pressure with four. And you know what? They did it. That's such a dramatic difference from what the Titans were a year ago, because they were still trying these things. And, yeah, they got creative with where the rushers were coming from. They would drop a defensive line into underneath coverage. That sometimes they do it with Bud Dupree and Harold Landry. I know it drives fans insane. But if that's your changeup, as opposed to sending additional pressures, additional blitzers, And if you can get that effective pressure with 4, because Harold Landry is playing at a high level right now. Danico Autry has been probably their best 2021 acquisition, either free agency or the draft. Jeff Simmons, of course, played a massive role in that game, and not just on the goal line stop. He had a fourth quarter sack as well that helped cue things up for his defense. They have been effectively getting pressure with 4. And that, against a team like Buffalo, where you're trying to confuse the quarterback, against a team like Kansas City, where you may be able to confuse the quarterback and he makes the play anyway because he's got freakish ability, you have to have that at your disposal as you try and find ways to not outright stop them, but to limit them. Field goals in today's NFL, especially when you get into the red zone, that's a win for the defense, 10 times out of 10. I understand you're giving up points, but you are doing things to limit the opposition. It's not just about getting them or keeping them out of the red zone or keeping them from attempting field goals. Ideally, you don't want to do that, but that is a win once the opposing offense gets into that position. For them to walk away with 2 early red zone drives and leave with only 6 points. It's what killed the Titans against the New York Jets. 3 red zone drives that ended in 9 points. 9 points that could have been 21. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in on the conversation. What do the Titans need to do to limit Patrick Mahomes on Sunday? Because what their game plan was against Josh Allen, and we'll go into it a little more in depth, and I'll have Cosell tell you what's happening with Patrick Mahomes right now, why he doesn't necessarily look as great or as comfortable as he has in years past. We'll do that coming up next. Your phone calls as well. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Take every Titans game with you.
Put your seatbelt on and let's do this thing. Let's do this thing is right.
Get every game by downloading the 104.5 The Zone app.
offense than Derrick Henry was. She somehow managed to dig up a file from 2018 from a now defunct morning radio show and brought the SoundCloud clip back to life. I was listening during the commercial break. It has me scared bleepless.
That's dedication.
She's
Amazing.
the worst. No.
Props, Puka.
No golf clap for Puka. No, that is too thorough. We cannot have that coming back to light. That is something that scares me more than anything because I have never been more wrong in my life than I was in that moment. But that was what David Fluellen got snaps over Derrick in that game. So I'm going to stand on that. But how different the world was back in 2018 before the Titans played the Patriots. Ugh. Somebody get rid of that thing. So what we were going to talk about here is what's happening with Patrick Mahomes. The Titans defense did a good job to not stop but limit Josh Allen on Monday Night Football. How can they do the same against Patrick Mahomes? He's not playing outright fantastic. He's not playing like the best quarterback in football right now, which is what I have largely considered him. But what he is doing is still good enough to beat you, as the Washington football team found out on Sunday. Charles Davis, our guest earlier, was on the call. And so Greg Cosell and myself, we were talking about this last night on the install with Greg Cosell. You can go follow the podcast in your favorite podcast app. You can go leave us a nice rating, a nice review. It would make me very happy if you did that. And we did. Normally we don't do a whole episode Titans because it's technically a league-wide podcast with a local Nashville bent, right? But this episode, with the Bills game, with the Chiefs upcoming, and with Kansas City having its own issues, we spent the entirety of the time breaking down these two games. And so I asked Greg, I understand that he's still doing things statistically well outside of turnovers because he's turning the ball over at a much more rapid rate. But what is happening with Patrick Mahomes right now that is clear and obvious to you when you watch the tape? And this is what Cosell had to say.
And most people would probably say that, well, they're scoring a lot of points and he's throwing for a lot of yards. But that's not what a coach should be doing. A coach should be trying to get your quarterback, no matter who he is, to play to his highest level. What you're trying to get is your quarterback to play perfectly. And then as the old quote is, you strive for perfection and hope you grab excellence along the way. That's what coaching is. Yeah. You don't, just because you put up points and win games, you don't say, okay, everything's fine, let's forget about it. That's not what coaching is all about. One thing I thought was fascinating this past week, Mahomes had spoken publicly about the fact that his footwork was off, that his feet were a little too frenetic. I mean, they know. This is not, the tape tells you, Buck. Anybody who sits and watches tape knows this. This is not news. Mm-hmm. By looking at the tape and saying this, you're not saying Mahomes is not a good player. Right. That's not the point. That's the way people take it, but that's not the point. So everybody knows this. So when your quarterback is doing those kinds of things, what becomes most important? Protection. You want to get him as secure and as comfortable in the pocket as possible so that he feels that he can play with calm footwork, with a calm helmet, that he can just overall calm down in the pocket. So what did they do more of this past week against Washington, who, by the way, still has a very good defensive line? Even if their sack numbers aren't what they were in the past, they're still very good players.
Sure.
What did they do? They started the game out and they played with more two tight end sets, two tight end personnel packages than they had in any game this year. And they started with a philosophy of protection first. And that they're trying to get him comfortable again. And to some degree it worked. There were other plays, he's still, I think, a little overreactive to what he perceives as pressure. And I would say that he's still at times not particularly comfortable in a muddied pocket, where there's people around him, and he moves. And then he'll make a couple of those Mahomes plays and everybody thinks everything is fine. He's capable of that all the time, as you know.
So that is Greg Cosell's analysis of Patrick Mahomes right now. He's not in the best place, but he's still good enough to make these off-schedule plays that will burn you if you're not prepared for him.
But is it an issue of being too eager to make those off-schedule plays?
Yeah, he's not
Bailing too
comfortable.
early?
He's jittery. Patrick Mahomes, for the first time in his career, looks legitimately shook behind an offensive line that's not good enough to pass protect for him.
Because his whole career is a highlight reel of ridiculous off-schedule plays.
Hey, turns out when you get hit enough in the NFL, it can start to affect the way that you do your job. So when you come into the league and you're slinging fearlessly and nobody in the sport can stop you, and you have the answers to literally everything plus some, you can have this just unbreakable confidence. I'm not saying that Patrick Mahomes is lacking confidence right now. I'm saying that his play indicates that he's not outright comfortable. And that is something that you can maximize, especially with this newfound ability to pressure the quarterback consistently. An incompletion, it's not as good as a sack because you don't lose yards for an incompletion. But if you can get Patrick Mahomes to throw an incompletion when it otherwise might be a ball that's literally curled around a defender to get to Travis Kelce, the way that we've seen him do, or if you can hit him as he's letting that ball go and it makes him throw it out of bounds or makes him tuck it under, you are winning reps against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Pressure is going to be so critical in this because this offensive line can be had. And by the way, they're without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been on IR for now a couple of weeks and will miss this game against the Kansas City Chiefs. That has affected their running game. They beat up on the Washington football team on Sunday, but this is a different game that they'll have against the Titans.
Still had to overcome 2 early interceptions in that game.
I'm telling you, he's turning the ball. He's not comfortable right now.
He's second in the league in picks, 8 of them tied with Trevor Lawrence, only 1 behind Zach Wilson.
Yeah, and it's a much harder task to overcome, or it's harder to take advantage of those gifts that he gives you when your quarterback is Taylor Heineke. 615-737-1045. Let's go to Cavante in Memphis, who wants to weigh in.
Hey, man, I was just wondering, do you think that Derrick Henry is kind of like a similar to LeBron as far as being Bron is in year 19 and he still has the athleticism that he does? And I was listening to your take earlier about the Deion Lewis. I think you was kind of actually right because at the beginning, Derrick Henry would never go up the middle. And where I'm from, man, we just called him soft. He was just tiptoeing. I think he just tried to be a back that he wasn't. But now, because I hear that and I see that he's using the shoulder more. So I just figured you kind of was right at that time. Stuff changes. Updated his resume. But do you think Derrick Henry is like the other king the king? I'll listen to you guys. Shout out from Memphis, man.
Appreciate you, boss. We love all our listeners in Memphis. Love to see it. So I was right, damn it. I was. That's not the call I expected to get today when I brought that back to life. I was right in 2018 at the time, and then I was very, very quickly proven wrong after David Fluellen went down with a knee injury, and then all of a sudden Derrick Henry is turning into Derrick Henry in the second half against the Patriots. I was right. But, yeah, I mean, I've made that comparison before. I wrote that article last year. It's just now that more people are getting to attend these games and see it. Derrick Henry is LeBron as far as we are not, and now he is getting his flowers more than he has been because he's doing it on nationally televised games.
Yeah, Monday
now.
was a huge step forward in that.
Yeah, because he's carrying conversation across the league on Tuesday and really throughout the course of the week because now we're deep enough into the season for people and networks to have these MVP conversations. Derrick's greatness has been undervalued because enough people have not been watching him. Whereas it's my job to watch literally every game that he's ever played in. And I, at some point last season, had the revelation, this guy is just a certain kind of special that I hope that I have the presence of mind to take a step back and, like LeBron James, whether you like his personality, whether you hate his personality, whether you still hold the decision against him, LeBron James is 37? He's 38 right now, and he looks spectacular on Wednesday night against that was Tuesday night against the Golden State Warriors when the Lakers opened up. They lost, but LeBron, I mean, I can't say enough good things about what his greatness is across the decades on the court. Derrick Henry is different because it's difficult to sustain what he does versus what LeBron does over that kind of time. But just for this span, since halfway through 2018, There's not a more physically dominant player in football than Derrick Henry. There's just not. When we come back, we are going to talk about trade deadline potentials, trade deadline acquisitions that the Tennessee Titans should consider. One player that they should trade for and one player that they should try to get off their books before the deadline 12 days from now. That's next. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Coming up today on the 3HL.
We've got tons to get into. Titans, Chiefs, Balls, Bama, maybe. We're broadcasting live. Music City, Autoplex, 2430 Gallatin Pike.
That is correct. Talk to me, Bev. No, you in. We in. We all in. Let's go.
You can say whatever
Roll
you want.
it, yeah.
It's our promo.
Plus, we have great Cosell. I know we washed it away, but we can relive that Monday night win just a little bit with Mr. Cosell.
Most definitely. Then we got the Savage himself. I'm going to try to pull it out of him and see exactly just what happened with those boxes that the donations went in. But that's neither here nor there. Ramon Foster will be joining.
Today, starting at 3 p.m. on 104.5 The Zone.
for the first time in a game all season on Monday night. So where would you tinker if you were John Robinson in his front office? Where would you tinker with this roster at this point? Because ESPN has a trade deadline article up about rumors, news, deals, and reactions, basically, for what is happening in the NFL right now. And they asked each of their NFL Nation reporters what move makes the most sense for the team that they cover ahead of the deadline. Now, for the Titans, Teron Davenport, our buddy over at ESPN.com, wrote down that Josh Reynolds would be the player that most makes sense to move because of the depth that they currently have on the roster, because it seems like Julio Jones and A.J. Brown are both trending in the right direction, and because Josh Reynolds has been a healthy scratch several weeks at this point. Now, it doesn't mean that he doesn't benefit you to have on the roster, and maybe you don't think that's a luxury that they can afford to give away, but it comes at a time when the Titans desperately need help in their secondary. Now, they made some moves. Greg Maben is now on the active roster. They signed him from the Cardinals practice squad. I imagine we will see a practice squad call-up for the Titans as well as we get closer to game time against Kansas City. But do you believe that to be enough? Because what is also listed here is the ESPN article, or the ESPN Broncos reporter, Jeff Legwold, saying that Kyle Fuller makes the most sense, the former Bears corner, who went to play for Vic Fangio and was a little bit of an apple of Titans fans' eye there for a while. Kyle Fuller may be available to acquire. What are you willing to give up to go get Kyle Fuller becomes a different conversation. And do you care at all if John Robinson is burning draft picks to make the 2021 team better? Because this is supposed to be your year after all. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in. For me, and I've been trying to find out, because they are exploring options, the Titans, but how close they are to acquiring a corner or a member of the secondary to help boost their room, I don't think it's as close as people would want it to be. And the movement on Josh Reynolds, if there is any, would require somebody to be interested in Josh Reynolds. And if I'm a team that's looking at what he has been dealing with, going on the record about dealing with Achilles issues, coming off of a shoulder surgery, now a healthy scratch for a team that could and did need his help against the Jets when they had nobody else. But outside of that, he's not been a factor. Doesn't have great value on special teams. Am I willing to give something up to get Josh Reynolds? Would there be any interest in him at all? I'm sure he wants a better opportunity. This is supposed to be a prove-it year for him. This was supposed to be the better opportunity for Josh Reynolds. Hadn't materialized that way. So we'll continue to monitor that, and if as information becomes available, we'll keep you updated on it at this point. You also have to remember that you don't have a second-round pick to factor into this equation as well, because you gave up that for Julio Jones. 615-737-1045. Let's go to John in Sumner County who wants to chime in. What's up, John?
Yeah, hey. So I was just looking at Derrick Henry. So I remember hearing all these things about, guys like Jim Brown and O.J. Simpson saying they just had bodies that were godsends, and they never worked out. I consider Derrick Henry the same as them, except in the workout era. What do you think?
I don't have the context of what the only thing I've seen from OJ is what highlights they showed during the 6-part ESPN Making a Murderer? OJ Simpson? No, that was the Fox thing, wasn't it? So my knowledge of OJ Simpson only goes back to the 30 for 30. Didn't ESPN win an Oscar for that?
It was excellent.
It was so good.
Yeah, I remember binging that.
So I have no idea about. I would be lying to you if I tried to.
Yeah, our generation knows OJ for different reasons. But he was a phenomenal football player.
Sure, I'll take your word for it. But I mean, in those highlights that they show during the documentary, you see the things that people are talking about, right? Just Derrick Henry, the way that he pulls away from people at that size. You see the same kind of. I mean, OJ Simpson in those highlights is playing a different sport than the other guys who are on the field in the 70s.
And I think that's what Jim Brown was. Like, how can he be that big and that fast at the same time?
Yeah, so both of those guys predate us as a show, and I would imagine the vast majority of people at this point. But Derrick Henry is playing a different sport. But how can they maximize what Derrick Henry is doing, right, with the trade deadline upcoming? Can they find ways to make this worth Derrick Henry's while? If you're going to squeeze all of this out of him this year with no future certainty that it is repeatable, other than the fact that he's doing incredible things coming off a year where most guys don't after rushing for 2,000 yards. How can you maximize the opportunity of the current roster at the trade deadline? Can you? Is it worth it? 615-737-1045.
Bill Barnwell of ESPN and John Miller's tweeting us about this right now. On ESPN Plus, put out a bunch of proposals across the league. He has the Titans going for Desean Howard of the Dolphins for a 2022 first-round pick and a 2023 second-round pick.
Yeah, somebody just DM'd me. Chris Campbell just DM'd that to me on Instagram as well, saying, I say we throw whatever we can at Desean Howard. The Dolphins' defense started out the year well, and since then it looks like those guys are probably going to break up. What I'll say to you about it is that Desean Howard and Kyle Fuller, if those are indeed legitimate targets for the Titans, and I don't know how legitimate they are. I know that they're exploring possibilities, as every NFL team explores possibilities with the deadline looming. I would say to you at this point, I don't know that you need to outright mortgage your future for what Desean Howard would cost. Now, Kyle Fuller is going to come at some expense as well, but it's not. And listen, they made this a possibility when they restructured Julio Jones's deal. It's not just exclusively about rolling money over to future seasons and trying to make your finances make sense next year when Tannehill's cap hit goes through the roof and Taylor Lewan's cap hit goes up in number as well. You're going to need some financial flexibility, but also it allows for you to have some breathing room right now. Desean Howard is coming off a deal. Who's the other corner opposite Desean Howard who just basically held out of Dolphins camp because he was the best player or the best corner on his roster, but not being paid like one. And in fact, that ended up working out in his favor not for the Dolphins at this point at 1-5, but Desean Howard. I can't remember the name of the corner, Lucas, or if you could pull that up for me. Who has been pretty good for the Dolphins and better than Desean Howard, but his name escapes me at this particular moment. Was it Desean Howard that held out for the contract?
I think that's who you're thinking of.
Jay on YouTube was it Desean Howard that held out for the contract?
Yeah, and he still had a bunch of years left on his contract.
That's right, because Byron Jones is the one who got paid, and Desean Howard was like, no.
Howard held out with like 3 or 4 years still left on his deal.
That's very interesting. Okay. 615-737-1045. Steve is on Briley Parkway. I love when people tell me where they're driving on. Steve wants to weigh in. What's up, Steve?
Yeah, there's a certain jackrabbit on the defensive side of the ball that misses a whole lot of coverages, and I don't think he's earned his money. What do you guys think?
Well, I would say that whether he's earned it to this point or not, he's the best thing you got right now. Look at what the Titans are dealing with in the secondary.
Yeah, long as Fulton's on IR.
Jackrabbit has underwhelmed. There's no question about it. I think that his best game so far was probably Jacksonville. And I saw a lot of people making jokes at his expense on Monday night because the best defense that he played was causing Breon Borders to drop that interception. But you can't afford to not have Jackrabbit on your roster. You literally have almost no other corners left.
Did have the PBU on that play.
Oh, what on the interception? Oh, he got the credit. It's pretty good. When we come back, we'll take some more of your phone calls. Mike Golic Jr. will join us as well. We'll pivot to a little bit of college football. We'll ask Mike. He played offensive line, obviously, at Notre Dame. And we will ask him what it would be like to block for somebody like Derrick Henry, if such a thing even exists. And also, if you're caller number 5 right now, why don't we give the audience something? Why don't we give you something to stick around? If you're caller number 5 right now, we'll give you a pair of Titans tickets to go and see the Titans versus the Chiefs on Sunday at Nissan Stadium. You have a chance to win a pair of tickets to see your Titans face off against their remaining 2021 home opponents at Nissan Stadium, thanks to Kentucky legend. Be caller number 5 right now for a chance to win Titans versus Chiefs tickets, 615-737-1045. For more info on Titans Ticket Tuesday, presented by Kentucky legend, visit 1045thezone.com.
Mickey Ryan knows that there's nobody in media better on the Titans than his partner, Blaine Bishop.
It's not even a question.
And even the hitman agrees.
What?
Blaine and Mickey, today from 1 to 3 on 1045 The Zone.
The NBA is back, and will have Miami and North Carolina State this weekend. I'll be curious to get his thoughts on what the hell is happening with the U right now. But where I want to kind of go first with Golic Jr. when he hops on is I'm curious to see from Mike's perspective how much different the conversation around Derrick Henry for MVP has been since Monday Night Football. Because the support for him publicly by high-profile people at the worldwide leader in sports, and not just on the worldwide leader in sports at ESPN, but across the sports media spectrum, it feels like it's as overwhelming this year or this week as it was at any point last season while he was putting together a 2,000 rushing yard campaign. So why don't we ask Mike Golic Jr., who joins us now, ESPN, of course. You can hear Canty and Golic later this afternoon as well. Boss man, how we living?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I am doing well. We're just still riding high on Derrick Henry's performance on Monday Night Football. The Titans fans are very much enjoying the attention that they're getting from the rest of the country. I want to start there, Mike, because the overwhelming support for Derrick as an MVP candidate, and I understand that we're just in week 7, but it seems to have totally taken a different kind of tenor on after Monday Night Football just because people saw him do it in a nationally televised game. Have you guys felt that at the network and just seeing the overwhelming support from people across the country watching football as opposed to just us here in Tennessee?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's how we make all our decisions. Like, if you do it in a primetime game, you know it counts for double, maybe even triple in some instances. Like, that's how this has always worked. I will say Derrick Henry also, I saw he just showed up to their presser today wearing a shirt with, I believe, a dog named Bammed on it from a local shelter who's trying to get adopted. So if you want to win, this is said true with advertising too, just put dogs in your ads. And everything Derrick Henry does right now is in some way, shape, or form an ad for his MVP candidacy. So that's a great note. But what the national games also do is, if we haven't necessarily been paying as much attention as we should to Derrick Henry, and part of that is, the Titans season at this point, the division they play in, being largely trash. Like, now we pop open the hood and look underneath every once in a while. And I was watching NFL Live yesterday and heard Laura Rutledge say that Derrick Henry is averaging over 120 yards a game.
Oh, my God, I saw that too.
His last 35 games.
Oh, I fell out of my chair.
I couldn't believe it. And so the primetime games do serve that good of, all right, when they're spaced out accordingly, we go back and finally do the legwork on a team like Tennessee, who still has plenty to play for. They play in a very bad division, so we expect them to win this thing, even as the Colts and them start to look a little more confident with Carson Wentz. But now we notice this, and we get to stop and appreciate it because it really is unprecedented. A back with the kind of wear and tear that he has racked up already in his NFL career should not be able to exist at this size or any size, but here he is.
At Mike Golic Jr. is where you can follow him, of course, and see him across all of the ESPN platforms. He's on the NC State-Miami game this weekend as well. Mike, as somebody who, of course, played the offensive line position at Notre Dame, as somebody who has a unique appreciation for what goes down in the trenches, how has this kind of hit you, what Derrick is doing? Because I looked at Mina Kimes' Twitter feed yesterday, and she's just out here saying somebody like Derrick Henry shouldn't exist in today's game, and yet here he is, bigger, faster, stronger than a sport filled with giant, fast, strong, angry people. Does this kind of, I don't want to say change the way that people are evaluating football because he seems to be one of one, but do you see that renewed appreciation for the running game because of Derrick?
Well, I think we also have to recognize, you're right, he is one of one. And I heard Marcus Spears on NFL Live yesterday. God, I am like a walking billboard for this show, but I love all the people involved, so it is what it is. He goes, Derrick Henry made me realize I got too cute. I looked at modern football, and it made me forget what this is really about. Someone being able to put up the kind of production that Derrick Henry is at that position, like if it doesn't look the way that we've deemed modern running backs are supposed to look with all the receiving and all that stuff, then we somehow discount it. Derrick Henry is a one of one. I covered Derrick Henry's Heisman Trophy year at that ceremony. I got to interview him for ESPN Radio after he won. and I stared eye to eye with him. That should not happen. I should not stare eye to eye with a human being that I'm supposed to be blocking for, let alone then watch him run away from guys the way he has consistently since he got into the NFL. And so, yeah, I think it's renewed focus in a different way. Like, Tennessee can be a little more old school with their ground attack. The last time we saw something like this was the Vikings vintage Adrian Peterson coming off a knee injury. This is something akin to that. This is something very few, if any, other people will be able to do, so we probably need to appreciate it.
There's a video clip going around, Mike, of Henry dapping up Jeff Simmons after that goal line stop on Monday Night Football, and they're the same damn size. Jeffrey Simmons is 6'4", 300 pounds. Derrick's probably 250, but still 6'4". It looked like King Kong and Godzilla dapping up.
It is truly terrifying, and we had this argument the other day, and shame on me for not positing his name sooner. If you had to, and this is going around Twitter, create a football team entirely comprised of one player for all 11 spots on both sides of the ball, who would you pick? Aaron Donald obviously got thrown out there. I thought George Kittle was a compelling answer, and someone posed Derrick Henry, and I realized that's probably on the medal stand here. He is that terrifying.
It's been really, really fun to watch his career so far throughout the course of his time here in Tennessee. Mike Golic Jr., our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. You can catch him later this afternoon on Canty and Golic, 2 to 6 Central Time. And, of course, you could see him all over ESPN. So, Golic, I want to kind of look at the world of college football right now, because I know that you were on the call of Tennessee a couple of weeks ago with your guys' crew. The game against Ole Miss was, of course, a talking point nationally. A lot of national attention for the state of Tennessee this week. Some good, some bad. What have you made of the progression of Tennessee under Josh Heupel? And particularly, what have you seen from this defense under Tim Banks? Because I think that's been the most surprising thing of all of it for us here locally.
Yeah, I think just that, the way it's been able to come together as quickly as it has, because you mentioned Tim Banks out, but when we had our meetings with him and talked to him about this, one of the questions we asked was, do you have to coach defense differently opposite an offense that wants to go at the speed that Josh's does? And they gave all the right answers, that you don't, we're going to go out here and do what we do type thing, even for a defense that, hell, when we have him, was missing a major starter at every level and still managed to go out and have a dominant performance against South Carolina. I do think there is some ability that they have displayed, though, to withstand sudden change, because that's what you've got to do if your offense goes 3 and out quicker than expected, if they turn the ball over the way they had earlier in the season. And I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. The offense is going to get the billing, but Tim Banks' outfit has the unenviable task of being the dance partner with a group that, yes, when it's humming, like we've seen it hum some point this season, especially since Hendon Hooker took over, that's a different breed, what you can do, and it helps mitigate some of the areas this team is still going to have to improve personnel-wise, but defensively off on the side of that here, that's a tough task, and they've made it look good so far.
Unclear whether Hendon Hooker will play at Alabama this weekend. God knows they could use him, and it may not make a difference either way. But Joe Milton, to end that game running out of bounds as time expired, is not the kind of look. I mean, I don't want to bury him, right? Like, I don't want to bury him, Mike. But the way that game ended like that, everybody in Knoxville, in Middle Tennessee, in East Tennessee, and West Tennessee just dropped their head into their hands and said, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, it was a tough look, and you feel for Joe. Like, I understand why he got to start the season, just an unbelievable collection of gifts and talent, but that lack of awareness there, in addition to some of the deep ball woes, is why you had to make the change here. And I applaud Joe for being ready at the end of what was a chaotic finish to that game, staying dialed in on the sideline, but clearly not enough in that moment there. Certainly one he's going to want to have back, but again, so much happened over the course of that game. It's one play, it's magnified because it's at the end, but we certainly won't bury the kid.
So they're at Alabama, at Kentucky, and hosting Georgia in their next 3. It's going to be difficult for the University of Tennessee to kind of keep their head above water, no matter who the quarterback is. What Alabama did against Mississippi State was about the most predictable thing in the world for a Nick Saban team coming off a loss. But I want to kind of talk about what they are doing defensively, Mike, because I don't know whether Josh Heupel's offense, regardless of the quarterback situation, is going to be able to exploit them the way that we might have thought a couple of weeks ago. But what is different about this Alabama defense this season, and how are they trying to make up for some of the issues that they've had?
Well, I think one thing I would push back on the notion that whichever quarterback wasn't going to have issues here. The game changes a lot with Hendon Hooker under center or not. Like, what he's been able to do for the deep passing game, I think on the season, when I got to them against South Carolina, they had something like 7 plays of over 40 yards, and Hendon Hooker had accounted through the air for 4 of them. Like, since he came into the game, that deep passing element off of what Josh wants to do, low and slow near the line of scrimmage, all those wide receiver screens, is you got to be able to hit on some of those deep passes so every defensive back can't come up and play as aggressive as Alabama's going to in this game. And Joe Milton has not displayed an aptitude for that so far. That was the issue with him. We saw it really highlighted against Pitt when he struggled and was airmailing a lot of those deep throws. And so if you take that away, Alabama doesn't need an excuse to come up and play you tough. Like, with Battle and the rest of that secondary that looked like they had received the butt chewing that Nick Saban laid out to them after Texas A&M, well, this last week against the Mississippi State offense that is very different. But the offense that's not all that different is Ole Miss. And the thing that thwarts a lot of these tempo attacks is exactly what Alabama, what Georgia, and these high-end SEC machines are built to do, which is, hey, we only got to put 4 or 5 guys near the line of scrimmage because we got 5 stars across the board who can handle their business, and then we are going to get up, we are going to play aggressive, and we are going to tackle you near the line of scrimmage. We're not going to let you hit these bubble screens to Velus Jones underneath and gain 10 yards because we're playing in a cushion. We're going to get up in your face. We're going to make life hard for you. And when they can control the box along with that, that's the recipe to undo everything that tempo is supposed to kind of make easier on an offense that talent-wise isn't at the same place yet that Alabama, Georgia, et cetera are.
My producer Lucas just whispered into my ear, and fake injuries in the middle of your analysis there. You're the worst. This is just a bitter, miserable Tennessee fan the week after losing to Lane Kiffin. Get yourself together back there.
Hey, I love Lane Kiffin. I mean, nothing about that.
All right, very good. Mike Golic Jr. here with us on 104.5 The Zone. Is there a starter on the Georgia defense, Mike, that you wouldn't draft?
No.
Yeah.
I want all of them. They are Jordan Davis. I saw him in the game they played. I want to say it was against Arkansas. That was one of the big games that week. I forget if game day was there or not, but I remember just seeing them run onto the field. And Jordan Davis, who is the biggest scary man in the middle of a defense full of big scary men, ran out there wearing one of those like 60-pound weight room chains that you put on the end of a barbell. And he just wore it like a necklace, and it looked comfortable for him. He didn't look like he was really struggling under the weight of that thing. And when you look at the tone that he sets, N'Kobe Bean, the middle of that defense, I've said to everyone, Georgia's not playing against anyone that's on the field. They're playing against an invisible standard that they hold up inside that meeting room. Where if you see someone gain 3 yards on that team, they're getting up, MFing each other, cussing out because their standard, no one should gain an inch on that defense. That's what Kentucky did last week was amazing. Scoring points in the second quarter, no one had done so far this season. Scoring multiple touchdowns against that defense, they deserve a medal for that because that is the biggest, meanest group of the most disciplined players in college football right now. We're going to throw around all-time terms for this defense, and deservedly so, because they're playing a standard that very few of us will get to see before or after this, and it's special.
Mike Golic Jr. of ESPN, our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. Of course, you can see him on the call for the NC State Wolfpack at the Miami Hurricanes on ESPN2 Saturday night. How long did you know that Boone Goes the Dynamite was going to be Twitter gold, and why are you so much better at this than the rest of us?
I'm not going to lie to you. That was one of those, and everyone out there, if you're not already doing this, try out your tweets in the group chat before you send them. See how it goes over with some of your friends. Does it get a double tap? Does it just get the little hard impression thing? Or do people actually textually respond to you in that situation? I tried that one out. It did numbers in the group chat, and so I let it fly there and felt really good about it, as should everyone who is an App State fan, because I thought they were coming close to talking about this Miami team I'm getting ready to face. I thought App State earlier this season had a very legit chance to beat Miami going in. They almost pulled that off, and I understand they have a couple of suspect losses this season, but we saw, man, when Chase Bryson, that downfield passing attack got going, boy, oh boy, did the mullet-wearing folks at Coastal get a different second half than they bargained for.
It was an incredible game to watch amongst a lot of fun sporting events that took place last night. You can hear more of Mike Golic Jr. this afternoon on Canty and Golic. Mike, we appreciate your time as always. Enjoy the football over the weekend, and we'll catch up again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Mike Golic Jr., ESPN, kind enough to drop by the show. The world of college football is getting messy in a fun way, right? We're creeping closer towards the playoffs, and when the Vols go on their bye week next week, we'll do more of a state of the program. I know it's not quite the halfway point of their season next week, but given that they'll be off, I think we'd need to take a 1,000-foot view at what Tennessee is right now and how much, depending on how you feel about it, how much you think they've exceeded your expectations, whether they're right on pace for where you thought they would be under Josh Heupel, and whether you think, I don't know how you could think they've underwhelmed, but maybe there are some people out there who expect them to be better than they are at this point. But when you look at the college football playoff, Georgia 1, Cincinnati 2, Oklahoma 3, Bama 4. Ohio State is sitting on the edge there. I had no idea Michigan was undefeated. I just found that out the other day.
So is Michigan State.
No, I know. But Michigan State, I think is just a tad more, I think Mel Tucker's done a great job there, but I think they're a tad more fraudulent as a top 10 team than Michigan might be. But I was shocked to find out that Michigan was flat out undefeated.
Which is hilarious because when Iowa loses, or when Penn State lost their first game, it was and then when Ohio State lost to Oregon, it's like, all right, well, that's it. No one in the Big Ten going to the playoff, right?
We
buried everybody in the Big Ten, and Michigan's over here like, hey, we've got all these national championships. We're undefeated. And I was like, just be quiet, Michigan.
They're a spot. Well, no, it's not be quiet, Michigan. It's be quiet, Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
We're tired of you. We're tired of you in your khaki pants. Get the hell out of here.
They haven't been mentioned once in the playoff conversation.
Haven't lost a game. They're behind Ohio State in the AP top 25 poll, and Ohio State's got a loss on the year.
Because they're going to lose to Ohio State.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, guaranteed.
So we're just dismissing Michigan outright. You can't do it until we see you do it. And even then, I'm not going to think that Michigan can do it. Poor Jim Harbaugh. It's the end of the show. What the hell? Poll's next.
Friday night, it's CPA at Lipscomb Academy on the 104.5 The Zone Game of the Week. Presented by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office and Paul Winkler Investing. Coverage starts Friday night at 6:30 with Will Bowling and Lucas Panzica on your home for high school football. 104.5 The Zone.
end of the show, Spencer, he has somehow evaporated from the Zone TV chat. I haven't seen him since we started this hot streak.
APB out for Spencer.
And obviously we hope he's okay. And it would be terrible for me to be like, I only care about him if he comes back and gives us a good grade. But also, get the hell back here and give us our flowers.
He's an Ole Miss fan, too, so I'm surprised he didn't want to be a part of these conversations.
I think he was at the start of the week. I think there was some crow. Actually, no. Spencer has been absent from the proceedings for a while, so now I hope he's okay. Let me suss this out, because I was getting ready to leave for work. Lucas and I had concluded our pre-show call. I open up my mentions, and there's just a million responses of, who wants to tell him? Trade for? ? What did you do for my Twitter account this morning while I was in the shower getting ready for work? What did you do?
One of the polls was, would you trade Josh Reynolds? And I typed, would you trade for Josh Reynolds?
Oh. What? So
yeah. I accidentally typed, would you trade for Josh Reynolds? And then quickly deleted it.
And that was what people were so quick to bury for?
Freaking out about, yeah.
Do you understand what flooded my mentions because of one word? One simple,
3 letters.
One additional 4. Why? Did you do it on purpose?
No, I didn't. It was just me, bleary-eyed in the morning, taking out the polls.
So maybe we need to start doing the polls from your Twitter account, because you need to have some consequences associated with these issues that you have. I don't want to I don't want you to have zero repercussions, because there's no way for you to learn not to make these mistakes if I'm the one dealing with them.
I have about as much accountability as SEC officials when it comes to the polls.
With that, let's do the polls.
All right, Dan. I reckon I'll talk about a poll update. This is Carl Childers. There's a young feller. I think he's got the final numbers. Here's the producer of the Buck Reising show. A feller named Lucas Panzeker. Got any mustard and biscuits?
You did that same thing yesterday.
I don't think we did.
What's wrong with you? What is happening?
Do you trust the Braves to win the series? 62% say yes.
Find out tonight against the Dodgers. Game 5 in Los Angeles. Can the Braves get to the World Series tonight?
They're playing out of their minds.
I mean, Rosario was a revelation. He has been red hot throughout the course of this championship series. I don't want to give opinions on baseball and act like I've been following it all season long, because it's simply not true. I know that the Dodgers are the defending World Series champions. I know that the Braves should not have made it this far after losing Acuna earlier in the season. And I love the fact that they went in at the trade deadline instead of selling out, because I think that gave their fans a little bit of extra pride with the team that they have in front of them right now. But they can prove a lot to Braves fans, and really to the rest of Major League Baseball, if they can close out the Dodgers tonight, especially with the specter of last year hanging over them.
Yeah, they're at kind of a crossroads when Acuna went down. I remember having that conversation with Will Bowling. Do you tear it all down or go for it? And they went for it, and they're getting hot at the right time. 3-1. What could possibly go wrong? Why is the Dolphins' interest in Desean Watson coming up now? They lost to the Jags. They're averaging 4.7 yards per play, or wins over morals. 59% say it's wins over morals.
It's incorrect. They lost to the Jags.
That's 28%.
In London. Well, 28% of the people are actually looking at this from the most logical way. The owner's probably pissed. They lost to the Jacksonville Jags. Everybody in Miami's having a meltdown the same way the Titans fans did after losing to the winless at the time New York Jets. Since then, winless as well, the New York Jets. It happens.
Where's the Vols program halfway through the season? Ahead of schedule, right on schedule, or behind schedule? 61% say they're ahead. 33% say they're right on track. 6% say they are behind schedule. Chris Tucker kind of sums it up. It feels like offensively they're on schedule, but the defense is way ahead of what people expected.
Yeah, we'll revisit that at greater length next week, and we'll have a couple of our friends in the Vols media world join us to kind of evaluate the Tennessee program under Heupel at their bye week, because I think it's pretty interesting to see how they may find themselves. They may ultimately end up with 6 wins, right, which is where everybody was projecting them, and I don't know. ESPN doesn't release the metrics, how they come up with the football power index. It's just that's a preseason measurement that we use without any other context. But I think if you're a Vols fan, you got to be pleasantly surprised with where everything is right now. You're probably a little disappointed this week because you didn't beat Lane Kiffin. But outside of that, like, would you have thought you had a shot against Ole Miss prior to the last 2 weeks leading up into that? Of course not.
Should the Titans trade Josh Reynolds? 1,500 votes, 75% say yes. At Colin Russell on Twitter, whose Twitter name is Fire Todd Downing, says, for what? A bag of Doritos?
Yeah, you gotta have somebody willing to take Josh Reynolds. And it's curious to see the fact that he's been a healthy scratch. He doesn't have that value on special teams that they need to make him active on game day. He doesn't outweigh. Now, maybe we'll see if this changes without Cam Batson available to them, because Batson is somebody who they've used as a returner, obviously. But if that job goes to Mason Kinsey over Josh Reynolds, you're going to have a hard time getting somebody to take him off your hands. Now, it may not matter because he's on a one-year deal. You're not paying him a lot of money. So maybe you're just content to let him exist there. But if I'm Josh Reynolds, I want the hell out of here.
Last one of the day. Does Mike Vrabel want every game to come down to 4th and short?
Yes. That is the answer to the question. Mike Vrabel wishes that every game would come down to 4th and short and a goal line stop. That's how the Titans head coach chooses to exist. We'll do it again tomorrow. We'll have Coach Dave McGinnis. We'll have King John Reed. We'll talk about the Vols ahead of Alabama. And, of course, preview the Titans and the Chiefs. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. There's great content available for you in your favorite podcast app. Check out The Install with Greg Cosell after you've listened to 104.5 The Zone all day long, starting in just a few seconds from now. Because Blaine and Mickey, they're up next.
Witness the passion that unites us all.
Touchdown, Tennessee! Wow!
The Vols play here.
104.5 The Zone.